The first time I grew food on a balcony, I was renting a third-floor apartment with about 60 square feet of outdoor space, and no idea what I was doing. I bought a tomato plant from a gas station, put it in a plastic pot that was too small, watered it inconsistently, and watched it produce exactly 11 cherry tomatoes before it gave up entirely and died. I thought the problem was the space. I thought 60 square feet wasn't enough. I thought I needed land, a yard, a real garden before I could grow real food. I was wrong about every part of that, and I spent the next several years figuring out exactly how wrong. Today I'm going to show you 20 crops that don't just survive in containers. They explode. They go wild in ways that will make you look at your balcony, your patio, your sunny window, and see something completely different than what you saw before. A food production system waiting to be built. Stick around because number 6 on this list produces harvestable food in as little as 7 days and packs more nutrition per square inch than almost anything else you can grow. And number 20 is the one plant that most container gardeners grow but manage at about 40% of its potential, and I'm going to show you exactly how to get everything it's designed to give you. Subscribe to the Healing Homestead right now because every week we show you how to grow more food in less space with less money than you think possible. Let's get into it. Number 1. Cherry tomatoes. The container crop that runs on pure ambition. Cherry tomatoes are the undisputed king of container food production, and it isn't close. I want to explain why, specifically because understanding the mechanism changes how you manage the plant and how much you harvest from it. A full-size tomato plant is physiologically invested in producing large, heavy fruits. That takes energy, root volume, and space. A cherry tomato plant has evolved a different strategy entirely. Produce as many small fruits as possible, as fast as possible, for as long as possible. It's a quantity strategy rather than a size strategy, and in a container, that strategy is perfectly matched to the environment. My best container season ever came from a single sun-gold cherry tomato plant in a 12-gallon fabric pot on a south-facing balcony. I counted the fruits one afternoon in August out of curiosity. There were over 200 ripe or nearly ripe tomatoes on a single plant. The neighbor who stopped to look at it assumed I'd planted several plants together. I hadn't. That's what one plant in the right container with the right management looks like. Varieties like Sungold, Sweet Million, and Black Cherry are bred for exactly this kind of explosive output. They'll start producing in 55 to 65 days from transplant and won't stop until frost ends the season. The container size is non-negotiable. Don't go smaller than 5 gallons. 10 is significantly better because root volume directly determines fruit production. Give them a sturdy cage or trellis because these plants get tall and genuinely heavy with fruit. The one rule that matters most: the more you pick, the more they produce. This is not motivational language. It's the literal biology of indeterminate tomato plants. Harvesting signals the plant to keep flowering. Leave fruit too long, and production slows. Pick daily at peak season, and you're in a conversation with the plant where it keeps responding to your attention. Number 2. Swiss chard, the endurance athlete of container vegetables. If cherry tomatoes are the star of the container garden, Swiss chard is the foundation. Plant it once in spring, and it will produce continuously until hard frost. In mild climates, it goes through winter. On a single planting, you can harvest from the same plant for 6, 7, 8 months. Nothing else on this list offers that kind of season. Varieties like Rainbow Chard, Bright Lights, and Ford Hope Giant are both productive and genuinely beautiful. Wide flat leaves and colorful stems in red, yellow, orange, and white make container-grown chard look almost decorative. I've had visitors to my balcony garden ask what the ornamental plant was before realizing it was their dinner. The cut-and-come-again system works better with Swiss chard than with almost any other leafy green because chard doesn't bolt under heat pressure the way lettuce and spinach do. Cut the outer stalks down to 2 inches from the soil. Within a week, the plant is pushing out new growth from the center. Do this repeatedly through the season, and a single 5-gallon pot becomes a continuous source of one of the most nutritionally dense vegetables you can grow, high in vitamins K, A, and C, rich in magnesium and antioxidants. The nutritional profile of chard was understood long before modern analysis could name the compounds. Traditional Mediterranean cooking, which has used chard as a staple for centuries, combined it with olive oil in ways that modern nutritionists recognize as enhancing the bioavailability of fat-soluble vitamins through dietary fat pairing. Traditional cooks knew through observation what food scientists now confirm through measurement. Number 3. Pole beans, the vertical yield champion. If you want to understand how to think about container food production as a system rather than a collection of individual plants, pole beans are the best teacher. A single 5-gallon container with 4 to 6 pole bean plants trained up a stake or trellis can produce continuously for 8 to 10 weeks. The yield-to-footprint ratio is extraordinary. But here's what makes pole beans genuinely remarkable from a systems perspective. They feed themselves. Beans fix their own nitrogen from the atmosphere through a symbiotic relationship with soil bacteria. The plant is not depleting your container soil the way heavy feeders like tomatoes and cucumbers do. It's working with soil biology to provide its own fertility while it produces for you. My grandfather grew pole beans on a chain-link fence that separated his small urban yard from the alley behind it. Every summer, that fence became productive real estate. I thought of it as decoration until I understood what he was actually doing. He was turning a boundary into a food system. Container gardening with a trellis is the same principle. You're turning vertical space, which is free and which nobody thinks of as growing space, into productive acreage. Varieties like Kentucky Wonder, Blue Lake Pole, and rattlesnake beans are vigorous climbers that keep setting pods as long as you keep picking. The critical rule is the same as cherry tomatoes. Pick constantly. Leave a pod to mature fully, and the plant redirects energy towards seed completion and slows production. Harvest young tender pods every 2 to 3 days, and the plant keeps flowering, keeps producing, keeps feeding you. Number 4. Cucumbers. Vertical abundance in a small footprint. Most people think cucumbers need sprawling horizontal space, and they're right about vining varieties grown on the ground. But put a compact cucumber variety in a 10-gallon container with a trellis, and the equation changes completely. You're not using more ground space. You're using air, and air is free. Bush varieties like Bush Pickle, Space Master, and Patio Snackers stay compact at the base while sending vines upward. A single container cucumber plant trained up a 4 to 5 foot trellis can produce 15 to 20 fruits in a season under the right conditions. I've had single plants produce more than that in hot summers when I kept the fruit picked and the water consistent. Cucumbers are heavy feeders and heavy drinkers. In containers, they dry out faster than in ground soil, and moisture stress shows up immediately in the quality of the fruit. A 10-gallon pot is significantly better than a 5-gallon for cucumbers specifically because of root depth and moisture retention capacity. Water daily in hot weather without fail. The sensory experience of harvesting a cucumber from a container you grew yourself is one of those small pleasures that the industrial food system has entirely removed from modern life. The smell when you cut a fresh cucumber, that specific green, clean, almost watery fragrance, is more intense in a garden fresh fruit than in anything that has traveled through a supply chain. That difference is real, and it's one of the better arguments for growing your own food, even when grocery stores are fully stocked. Number 5. Peppers. The most container-adapted crop most gardeners underestimate. Here is something the gardening world consistently gets wrong about peppers. Hot peppers are among the most container-adapted, drought-tolerant, and continuously productive crops available. A single habanero, cayenne, or Thai hot plant in a 3 to 5-gallon pot can produce hundreds of peppers over a single season. The biology works in their favor for container growing in ways that most people don't realize. Peppers have compact root systems relative to the fruit they produce. They tolerate and actually prefer slightly drier conditions than tomatoes. They love heat, and containers heat up faster than ground soil, which accelerates production. And because they are perennial in frost-free climates, a pepper plant you start from seed this year can be overwintered indoors and come back next season as a mature, heavily producing specimen with a root system already developed. My most productive container plant of the last 5 years is a Thai hot pepper that I've overwintered 3 consecutive times. What started as a small seedling is now a woody stem plant that produces from the moment it goes outside in spring until I bring it back in before the first frost. The cumulative production from that single plant over 3 seasons is difficult to calculate, but certainly runs into the thousands of individual peppers. The one input that makes or breaks pepper production in containers is calcium. Blossom end rot, which shows up as dark, sunken spots on the developing fruit, is a calcium deficiency symptom that appears when moisture is inconsistent and calcium uptake is disrupted. Add crushed eggshells to your potting mix before planting, or use a calcium-containing fertilizer during fruit set. Number 6. Microgreens. Harvestable food in 7 days. Microgreens represent something that changes how most people think about what's possible in a container garden, specifically in a small apartment or in a space with limited sunlight. They are the shoots of vegetable and herb plants harvested at 7 to 14 days after germination, before the first true leaves develop, at the stage when nutritional density is at its absolute peak. Research on microgreens has found that many varieties contain concentrations of vitamins, antioxidants, and phytonutrients 4 to 40 times higher than the mature plant at harvest stage. The young shoot is investing everything it has into its initial growth push, concentrating nutrients in ways that the mature plant distributes more widely. You are harvesting at the moment of maximum nutritional intensity. The traditional knowledge base here is interesting. Sprouted seeds and young shoots have been consumed across Asian, Middle Eastern, and indigenous food traditions for centuries, specifically as restorative and medicinal foods, given to the sick and recovering because of their observed vitality. Modern nutritional analysis is explaining the mechanism behind observations that were made thousands of years before chromatography existed. From a production standpoint, microgreens require almost nothing. A shallow tray, 2 to 3 inches of potting mix, seeds sown densely, and a windowsill with indirect light. Harvest with scissors at the soil line at 7 to 14 days. Sunflower, pea, radish, broccoli, and amaranth varieties are among the most productive and flavorful. One tray produces a full harvest in a week. Succession plant a new tray every 5 to 7 days, and you have continuous microgreen production from the smallest possible space. Number 7. Zucchini, the legendary producer in bush form. Anyone who has grown zucchini in a garden bed knows the story. You go away for a weekend. You come back to baseball bats. Zucchini doesn't know when to stop. And that same relentless productivity translates directly to containers if you choose the right form. Bush varieties are the essential distinction. Vining zucchini will take over your entire patio. Bush types like Bush Baby, Patio Star, and Astia stay under 3 feet across and produce just as aggressively as their sprawling relatives. One plant in a 10 to 15 gallon container will feed a household through summer. The yield mechanism is straightforward. Zucchini produces both male and female flowers, and once the season gets going, female flowers appear nearly every day. In warm weather, a mature plant can produce 2 to 3 zucchinis per week, sometimes more, which means that harvesting twice a week becomes a genuine necessity rather than an aspiration. I want to be honest about the one failure mode with container zucchini. The containers need to be large, at minimum 10 gallons, preferably 15. The plant has substantial root requirements to support the large leaves and constant fruiting, and a pot that's too small produces a plant that struggles visibly and produces a fraction of what it's capable of. When I first grew container zucchini, I used an 8-gallon pot, and the plant survived but barely thrived. Moving to a 15-gallon pot the following season was transformative. Same variety, same balcony, dramatically different results. Number 8. Kale, the cold-hardy crop that outlasts everything else. Kale belongs on this list not because it's the most exciting producer, but because it fills a production window that nothing else on the list covers as well. It germinates in soil temperatures as low as 45 degrees. It tolerates light freezes. It improves in flavor after frost when the cold converts starches to sugars and produces the sweetness that transforms kale from something people eat out of obligation into something genuinely delicious. Compact varieties like Dwarf Blue Curled, Red Russian, and Lacinato produce heavily in 3 to 5 gallon containers from a growing tip that pushes out new leaves continuously as you harvest the lower ones. A mature kale plant maintains this steady production rhythm from early spring through late autumn without the bolting that ends the season for lettuce and spinach. Kale was a staple of peasant agriculture across northern Europe for centuries, specifically because it did what no other crop could in cold, marginal growing conditions. Traditional northern European diets built around kale, particularly in Scotland, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia, were providing vitamins A, C, and K along with calcium and iron through the coldest months of the year from a plant that barely needed coddling. The cultural memory of kale as survival food is embedded in its continued presence in cuisines that were shaped by centuries of hard winters. In a container garden, that cold hardiness means you can start kale earlier and keep it producing later than almost anything else. A container of kale started in February can still be feeding you in December. Number 9. Strawberries, the fruit that produces from every angle. Strawberries in containers have a quality that no other crop on this list possesses. When they're producing visibly, dramatically, beautifully, from every direction at once. Fruit trailing down the sides of a hanging basket. Berries ripening at every level of a tower planter. a terracotta pot overflowing with runners and fruit simultaneously. Day-neutral varieties are the container winner by a significant margin. Unlike June-bearing types that produce once in a concentrated window and then stop, day-neutral strawberries like Seascape, Albion, and Evie produce continuously from late spring through fall with consistent watering and monthly fertilizing. A single day-neutral plant can produce a quart of strawberries or more across a full season. A tower planter with 20 to 30 plants produces enough fresh berries to transform how you think about seasonal eating. There is something I find genuinely moving about watching a child pick a strawberry from a container on a balcony and eat it before it ever touches a plate. The strawberry traveled approximately 6 inches from plant to mouth. The experience of that fruit, the warmth from the sun still in it, the specific sweetness of something fully ripe and immediately consumed, is categorically different from anything that has traveled through a refrigerated supply chain. That difference is not romantic exaggeration. It's a real biochemical difference in the volatile aromatics that begin degrading the moment the berry is picked. Number 10. Leaf lettuce. Cut and come again for weeks. Leaf lettuce in a container is close to foolproof, and its cut-and-come-again harvest system makes it one of the most continuously productive plants per square inch of container space available to any gardener regardless of experience level. Varieties like black-seeded Simpson, salad bowl, buttercrunch, and loose-leaf mixes grow to harvest size in 30 to 45 days from seed. Cut the outer leaves, and the center keeps growing. Done correctly, a single planting feeds you for 6 to 8 weeks before the plant bolts. The mechanism is straightforward. Leaf lettuce grows from a central crown. Remove outer leaves, and the crown pushes out new growth to replace them. The plant's biological mission is to grow as many leaves as possible before it flowers. Give it consistent moisture and reasonable temperatures, and it pursues that mission relentlessly. The container advantage for lettuce is mobility. Lettuce bolts in heat when days lengthen and temperatures rise, shifting to seed production and making leaves bitter. In a container, you can move it to afternoon shade as summer heats up, dramatically extending the harvest window. A container gardener with a movable pot can grow lettuce through conditions that would end a ground planting weeks earlier. Shallow containers work perfectly. 8 to 12 inches deep is more than adequate for loose-leaf varieties. This is the crop for a windowsill, a railing planter, stacked shelves on a balcony, or any small surface with reasonable light. Are you starting to see this differently? Not a balcony or a patio or a windowsill, but a production system waiting to be assembled from the right components? Hit that like button if this is changing what you see when you look at your available space. And subscribe to the Healing Homestead if you haven't already. We go deeper every single week. Let's keep going. Number 11. Dwarf citrus, the container crop that produces for decades. I want to tell you about a Meyer lemon tree that lives in a large terracotta pot on a friend's apartment balcony in a city that gets genuine winters. She brought it indoors every November and back outside every May. She has done this for 11 years. That tree has produced lemons every single year without fail, and it is now a substantial, beautiful plant that has become one of the most reliable food producers in her life. Dwarf citrus, specifically Meyer lemon, Calamondon orange, and Eureka lemon, are among the most container-adapted fruit plants available. They have been grown in containers across Mediterranean Europe, the Middle East, and Asia for centuries, specifically because their compact root systems tolerate pot culture in ways that full-size fruit trees cannot. The Versailles orangeries of 17th century France were essentially the world's most elaborate container citrus collection. The practice of growing citrus in pots and moving them indoors through winter is ancient, practical, and reproducible at any scale. Meyer lemons in containers produce year-round in warm conditions, with the heaviest crops typically in winter and spring. The fruit is less acidic and more floral than standard lemons, with a thin, edible skin that makes it more versatile in cooking. A single mature dwarf tree in a 15 to 20-gallon container can produce 20 to 40 lemons per year, sometimes more under ideal conditions. The investment is longer term than the other crops on this list. A citrus tree takes 2 to 3 years to reach full production from a young nursery plant. But unlike annual crops that you replant each season, a well-maintained container citrus tree is with you for decades. The 11-year-old Meyer lemon on that apartment balcony is not going anywhere, is getting more productive every year. Number 12. Spinach, the highest nutritional yield per container inch. Spinach might be the most nutritionally efficient crop on this entire list relative to the space it requires. Dense in iron, folate, vitamins A and C, and antioxidants, it grows in 6 inches of soil in a container that fits on any windowsill. That combination of nutritional density and spatial efficiency makes it something that every container gardener should have running somewhere at almost all times. Varieties like Space, Thai, and Bloomsdale Longstanding are compact, bolt-resistant, and productive. Spinach grows fast. Baby leaves are harvestable in 3 weeks. Full-size leaves in 5 to 6 weeks from seeding. Like Swiss chard, it is a cut-and-come-again crop, but unlike chard, it is a cool season plant that performs best in spring and fall and struggles in summer heat. The container advantage for spinach is the same as for lettuce. Mobility. When temperatures rise in May or June in ground-planted spinach bolts, container spinach can be moved to shade, dramatically extending the harvest window. In fall, as temperatures drop, container spinach can be moved back into full sun to maximize the dwindling light. A container gardener can grow spinach for 6 to 8 months where a ground gardener might get 2. Succession planting is the strategy that turns spinach from a seasonal crop into a continuous supply. Plant a small container every 2 to 3 weeks from early spring through late fall. When one pot starts to bolt, the next is coming into its peak harvest window. The conveyor belt of spinach that fits entirely on a balcony. The traditional medicinal reputation of spinach across Middle Eastern, South Asian, and Mediterranean cultures for iron-rich blood support and restorative properties was observation-based knowledge that modern nutritional analysis has confirmed in detail. The cultures that built spinach into their food traditions were not doing so for flavor alone. They were responding to what they saw happen to the people who ate it consistently. Number 13. Potatoes. The grow bag miracle that surprises everyone. Most people think of potatoes as a field crop. Rows and rows of cultivated ground, serious acreage, a commitment to real agriculture. A 15-gallon fabric grow bag filled with loose potting mix on a concrete patio can produce 5 to 10 pounds of potatoes from 1 or 2 seed potatoes. That fact surprises people every time. The grow bag method works because of how potatoes form tubers. They develop along the underground stem, not just beneath the seed potato. Bury the seed potato near the bottom of a deep container, let it grow, and as the stem extends upward, you add more potting mix around it, burying more of the stem. Each buried section of stem becomes productive tuber-forming territory. By harvest time, potatoes are layered throughout the entire depth of the bag. I grew my first container potatoes skeptically, expecting modest results from what seemed like a novelty technique. The harvest surprised me completely. I tipped a single 15-gallon grow bag onto a tarp and found 8 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes layered throughout the bag like a treasure hunt. The physical experience of harvesting potatoes from a container, reaching into loose soil, and pulling out clean potatoes one after another connected me to something that felt genuinely ancient in a way that picking tomatoes or cutting lettuce didn't. Compact and early varieties work best. Yukon Gold, Red Norland, and Fingerling types mature faster and perform well in the confined root environment. Potatoes are not the first crop most container gardeners consider, but a couple of grow bags on a deck can produce pounds of the most satisfying food you'll grow all season. Number 14. Beets. The crop that gives you 2 harvests from 1 planting. Beets are exceptional for container gardeners for a reason that most people overlook entirely. You are not growing 1 crop. You are growing 2. The root and the greens are both edible, both nutritious, and harvestable at different stages without sacrificing either. Young beet greens at 3 to 4 weeks are tender, mild, and excellent as salad greens or lightly sautéed. As the root develops, the greens intensify in flavor but remain edible and nutritious. Then at 8 to 10 weeks, you harvest the full root. 1 planting, 2 food sources, 1 pot. That double harvest efficiency is something no other root vegetable on this list offers in the same way. The nutritional case for beets is genuinely compelling. Folate, manganese, potassium, and betaine compounds studied for cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory effects. The deep red pigment of traditional beet varieties indicates high anthocyanin content, the same class of antioxidants we've discussed throughout this list in connection with berry health benefits. The traditional use of beets in Eastern European folk medicine for liver support and blood health was empirical observation of effects that modern research on betaine and betalains is now explaining at the molecular level. Varieties like Detroit Dark Red, Kestrel, and Golden Beet work well in containers 8 to 10 inches deep. Cold tolerance, similar to spinach and kale, makes beets a strong spring and fall container crop. In a container, you can push the season in both directions, getting them in earlier and keeping them productive later than most warm-season crops. Number 15. Carrots, the crop that rewards proper preparation. Carrot success in containers comes down to one variable above everything else: depth. Most carrot failure in containers comes from shallow pots that force the roots to fork, stunt, or stop developing. Give them 12 to 14 inches of depth with the right variety, and carrots in containers can actually outperform carrots in clay-heavy ground soil. Short-rooted varieties are the essential choice. Chantenay, Danvers, Paris Market round carrots, and Littlefinger all top out at 4 to 6 inches in length. They're bred for exactly the conditions containers provide: confined root space, consistent moisture, loose, stone-free soil. The controlled moisture environment also prevents the cracking that happens when ground-grown carrots cycle through wet and dry periods. I grew up watching my grandmother fail at carrots in heavy clay soil year after year, producing forked, stunted, barely recognizable roots that she harvested with the resignation of someone who had accepted that carrots just didn't work in her garden. When I grew my first container carrots in a deep pot of loose potting mix, they came out straight, uniform, and genuinely impressive. I photographed them and sent her the picture. She didn't believe they were real. The thinning stage harvest is one of the underappreciated pleasures of container carrot growing. When you thin seedlings to their proper 2 to 3 inch spacing, the removed seedlings, tiny carrots with their feathery tops still attached, are edible. Baby carrot greens are mild and usable in salads. You're eating the garden management process itself. Number 16. Bush beans, the spring crop that cycles 3 times per season. Where pole beans are a long-season relationship, bush beans are a sprint. Plant them, water them, and in 50 to 60 days you have a full harvest. Then do it again and again. The ability to complete 3 full planting cycles in a single season turns one container into months of harvests from what is essentially the same footprint. Bush varieties like Provider, Contender, and Dragon Tongue stay under 2 feet tall, need no staking, and produce a concentrated flush of pods all at once. In a 12 to 15 inch wide pot or a window box, you can fit enough plants for a substantial meal. The concentrated harvest means you're getting a lot of food in a short window, which suits a cooking style that involves batch preparation and preservation as much as fresh daily harvesting. The container cycling advantage over ground growing is significant. After a ground garden bush bean harvest, you need to turn the soil, amend it, and wait for conditions to be right to replant. In a container, you can refresh the potting mix easily between successions, dumping the spent mix into a compost bin and refilling with fresh material. The container becomes a cycling production unit rather than a fixed growing space with the limitations that fixed spaces accumulate over seasons. Feed lightly. Too much nitrogen produces lush, green, impressive-looking plants with few pods. Bush beans want balanced fertility, not a nitrogen flood. Water consistently. Uneven watering is the primary cause of tough, stringy pods. Number 17. Ginger and turmeric. The container crops, they're also medicine. This is the entry that most container gardening resources omit entirely, and that omission reflects a limited understanding of what container growing can produce. Ginger and turmeric grow beautifully in containers, produce harvests that would cost significant money at a grocery store or health food shop, and provide the same compounds in fresh form that researchers have spent decades studying in isolation. Both are rhizomatous plants that grow from underground stems rather than seeds or bulbs. Plant a piece of fresh ginger or turmeric from a grocery store, making sure each piece has at least one visible growth bud in pot 8 to 10 inches deep with rich potting mix. Keep it warm, keep it moderately moist, and in 2 to 3 weeks growth emerges from the soil. Over a season of growth, the original piece multiplies into a cluster of fresh rhizomes that can be partially harvested in fall while leaving some in the pot to continue next season. Fresh ginger and fresh turmeric are categorically different from the dried powder sold in grocery stores. Fresh ginger root has a brightness and intensity of flavor that dried ginger approximates but never fully replicates. Fresh turmeric root contains the full spectrum of curcuminoids along with essential oils that enhance bioavailability in ways that dried powder cannot match. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine and traditional East and Southeast Asian food cultures built entire healing and culinary systems around fresh ginger and turmeric precisely because of the difference between the fresh and dried form. Growing your own container ginger and turmeric gives you year-round access to the fresh rhizomes in a climate where they would otherwise only be available dried or at premium prices from specialty stores. Number 18. Alpine strawberries. The perennial berry that asks almost nothing. Alpine strawberries are the container berry that most gardeners have never tried and almost universally love once they do. Fragaria vesca, the woodland strawberry, is the wild ancestor of the cultivated strawberry, smaller in fruit but more intensely flavored, more fragrant, and more reliably perennial in containers than most modern cultivated varieties. Unlike day-neutral and June-bearing cultivated strawberries that produce runners and need regular division and renewal, Alpine strawberries grow as compact, non-running clumps that simply get larger and more productive with each passing year. Plant them once, and they come back every season with increasing vigor. They don't need annual division. They don't need renewal plantings. They are genuinely perennial in the fullest sense of a word. The flavor is the revelation. Alpine strawberries are smaller than cultivated berries, but the flavor-to-size ratio is extraordinary. A handful of ripe alpine strawberries has an intensity of strawberry fragrance and sweetness that most commercial strawberries, bred for size, shelf life, and visual appeal rather than flavor, cannot match. The volatile aromatic compounds that produce that intensity are at maximum concentration in a fully ripe, garden-fresh fruit eaten within minutes of picking. Varieties like Mignonette, Alexandria, and Yellow Wonder are all excellent. Yellow Wonder produces pale yellow fruit that birds ignore, mistaking them for unripe berries, which means you get to eat more of what your plant produces. That specific practical advantage is the kind of accumulated observation that passes through generations of gardeners without anyone ever writing it down in a scientific paper. Number 19. Nasturtiums, the edible flower that transforms the container garden. Nasturtiums are the entry that changes how most people think about what belongs in a container food garden, because nasturtiums challenge the assumption that a food garden produces only vegetables. Every part of the nasturtium plant is edible. The flowers, intensely colored in orange, red, yellow, and cream, with a peppery, slightly sweet flavor. The leaves round and distinctive with a watercress-like bite. The seed pods harvested green and pickled as a caper substitute that has been used in European kitchens for centuries. Tropila majus has a documented history of medicinal use in South American indigenous traditions, where it originated, for respiratory conditions, and as an antimicrobial food. The glucosinolates that give nasturtiums their peppery flavor have the same class of antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory activity as the compounds in horseradish and wasabi. You are eating medicine and garnish simultaneously from the same plant. In a container, nasturtiums serve a second function beyond their direct food production. They attract aphids specifically, drawing pest insects away from neighboring vegetable plants. This companion planting function was understood by traditional gardeners long before the term integrated pest management existed. Nasturtiums planted alongside tomatoes and peppers in containers act as a living trap crop, concentrating pest pressure on a plant you're growing precisely because it produces sacrificially. Sow directly into containers in full sun to partial shade after frost danger passes. Within 6 to 8 weeks, they're producing flowers continuously until frost. No deadheading required. No special fertilizer. They actually bloom more prolifically in lean soil. The more you pick flowers for the kitchen, the more the plant produces to replace them. Number 20. Basil, the aggressive grower that most people manage at 40% of its potential. And here we arrive at number 20. The one I saved for last because most people grow it, and most people are leaving more than half of what it's designed to give them entirely on the table. Basil's biological mission is to flower, set seed, and complete its life cycle. The moment it flowers, it redirects all available energy from leaf production into seed development. Leaves become small, bitter, and sparse. The plant that was producing abundantly for your kitchen becomes something that is finishing its life cycle rather than serving yours. The management technique that transforms basil from a seasonal purchase into a continuous production powerhouse is pinching, and it is so simple that its effectiveness seems almost improbable. Every time a flower bud forms on any stem, you pinch it off at the node. The plant responds by branching at that point. One stem becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes 8. A single basil plant managed this way for 3 months becomes a dense, multi-stem bush that produces more fresh basil than one household can reasonably use. My grandmother kept a single basil plant on her kitchen windowsill from May through October every year by pinching it with the same casual regularity that she deadhead her flower garden. She never ran out of basil. She never bought it from a store during those months. When I finally understood what she was doing and why, I realized the same knowledge that makes a perennial garden work, the principle that the right intervention at the right moment increases, rather than decreases production, applies to an annual herb on a windowsill. Basil grown in the same container as cherry tomatoes is not just a convenient pairing. It is a centuries-old companion planting combination refined across Italian, Greek, and Middle Eastern garden traditions that understood through observation what modern research has since confirmed. The aromatic volatile oils in basil deter specific pest insects that target tomato plants. The combination is both a food pairing and mutual support system. A large container with cherry tomatoes and basil is a food production unit and a beautiful object simultaneously. The container garden is not a compromise. It is not second best to ground growing. It is a system, and when you understand each plant's growth habit, its inputs and outputs, its seasonal rhythm, and its response to management, you can build something on a balcony or a patio or a windowsill that produces with a precision and efficiency that most traditional gardens never achieve. The knowledge has always been here. The plants have always been available. Now, you know which ones to choose and exactly what to do with them. Smash that like button if this changed how you see your available space. Drop a comment and tell me which crop you're starting with. Are you going straight to cherry tomatoes because you want the most dramatic return for your investment? Starting microgreens on your kitchen counter this week because you want food in 7 days? Or are you planting ginger and turmeric because you want the container crop that's also a medicine cabinet? I read every single comment at the Healing Homestead. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell. Every week we show you how to grow more food in less space with less money than you think possible. See you next day.